Our first speaker is Bernd. How many people know Bernd? Okay. You got some newbies. All right, so patients do not simply want to avoid disease, they want to be healthy. While U.S. emergency rooms are extremely good at resolving a true acute care crisis, like getting hit by a car, the system does not get people healthy. For example, many of the most popular prescription drugs in the U.S. today do not cure any disease. They simply reduce or mask symptoms and have serious side effects. Statins, CoQ10 depletion, and muscle pain, sometimes death. So Bernd is going to talk to us about longevity and preventing aging diseases. Please welcome Bernd Friedlander.
So, can I improvise?
Your mic's
I know.
on.
You got me? Sorry. Hello. Is it going? Not yet? Okay. Okay. All right. Just a little background on myself. I graduated in 1972 from San Francisco State in exercise physiology. And I worked as a physical therapist for 6-7 years. Then I worked with the Edgar Cayce Foundation. If you're, okay, and I think Edgar's around here somewhere. You know, are you familiar with Edgar Cayce? Well, look into that. I did a lot of work there. And then I got into chiropractic school later on in the, from 78, 81. So in 1972, I got into nutritional research with a guy named Leo Stein, who was probably the most brilliant person I first encountered with. And he took me as a pupil, but as a son, and taught me everything about nutrition, vitamins, and B complex back in the 70s. As a matter of fact, there was an article in Chronicle where I'm taking white bread away from the shelves. And they recorded, it took a picture of it, and it says, gentleman's removing white bread from the shelves. And then, you know, it's about getting rid of, you know, types of non-nutritional values from breads. So then I got into 81, 78, I got, my background also, I played professional soccer, I coached professionally, and I ran track and field. I was selected by the U.S. Olympic team in the 68, but I refused to run because I only ran track 1 year, and I didn't have the mindset to do so. And so it gave me a lot of learning abilities from playing sports, because in 1978, I ended up working at UCLA while I was going through chiropractic school, and never attended school, but I was down on the field. And I was selected in 1980, 84 by the U.S. Olympic team to run the 80-84 Olympic performance and coaching and training and nutritional. So I got into the rehab end of sports medicine and designed the first nutritional non-steroid amino acid program. And I learned so much about steroids, and I had to learn about it to understand what amino acids and what nutrients can enhance performance the same way as human growth hormones or anything like that, and discovered by applying the first amino acid complex in 1980-84, and we had a boycott in 1980, so we didn't have, we weren't doing, we had to retrain our athletes for 84, and in 84 we had the highest performance results of gold medalists in our group through our performance enhancing kind of non-steroid use of nutrition and supplementation and mindset. And what I learned from all that, working in 86, I worked with the Raiders, and the first year I worked with them, they won the Super Bowl. Then I worked in 87 with the Lakers, and the first year I worked with them, they won the World Championship. And it was all about designing a program and mental attitude. I was very fortunate that I had somebody from Tony Robbins as a patient of mine who started working with us, and we started doing mental performance, you know, looking in the mirror and looking at yourself and enhancing performance. But the key was positive attitude, you know, waking up in the morning and having a positive attitude. You know, that's the most powerful tool you have. I'm going to give you the tools that really have value in longevity and aging. So in 1981, I got into cancer research. In 82, 83, 84, I got into caloric restriction research. Then in 87, 86, I got into orthomolecular research on aging and cancer and disease. And so I was a sponge, not in school, not in class, but outside of school. I became a sponge in learning about health and nutrition and quality of life. And all my patients were either sports or they were celebrities. Julia Roberts, Sylvester Stallone, Steven Seagal, Arnold Schwarzenegger. So they were into what I was doing, longevity research, nutrition, and performance, and positive attitude. So I applied all these things, and while I was doing all this, I also learned. I learned a lot about the human body, and then recently in the last 10, 15, 20 years, I started working with Ohio State University College of Medicine with Vernon Stevens on cancer, and I'll share a lot of things about cancer that's profound today. And also at Florida A&M with Elizabeth Maggio, a brilliant scientist. We looked at botanicals and compounds that have anti-inflammatory, epigenetic factors, anti-tumor factors, proliferating factors, all of that. And we started looking at methylene blue and colloidal silver and profound effects from natural medicine. Natural medicine is probably your gift, and we can talk about more of that. But then I got into a program, and I studied with a guy who was doing chemistry of life. And then I started talking to a guy named Robert Watts, who, as you know, the cricket and DNA. And he was talking about something on Charlie Rose, which I was working with, was biochemistry of the cells, going back to the DNA, the RNA, but the mitochondria. In 1987, 88, 90, I got into mitochondrial research. Didn't know anything about it. Started learning everything I can. Today is probably the biggest research in the whole industry. Harvard is doing it, UC Davis, USC. It's discovering the chemistry of cells. What Robert Watts said something profound when we spoke about this way back 10 years ago or so. He says, we got to go back to understanding who we are and the cell, how the cell functions. And so what I did was I wanted to find out the chemistry of life. Where did we come from? How did we get here? And who are we? You know that about 3.8 billion years ago, there were dynamic situations that were happening on the earth. You can call it God, whatever you want. If you're religious, fine. But things happened that created life. It was where the earth was located from the sun, from the moon, was dynamic in creating life. The content of oxygen in the atmosphere had the perfect oxygen level for creating life, CO2. And there were thermodynamic volcanic vents in various locations of the world that were producing the tools that are necessary that created wonderful life, living systems, everything. The chemical that started everything was, fats, carbs. All this came from elements of the ocean and the vents and all that. And then when I started understanding this, that chemistry started in the right environment, the right conditions of the sun, of the temperature. It had to be at a right temperature of 72 degrees. It had to be the distance from the sun to the earth, the moon to the earth. If you think about it, if we were any time closer to the sun, we would probably burn to death and destroy ourselves. If we were too far away from the sun, we'd probably freeze. So these elements created a perfect environment. And one of the things that people are missing out was salt. It was the right salt conditions in the environment at that time. It was called the continent of fungi. The fungi was a great element that started life and living systems and birds and fish and reptiles and everything. Salt was important. And we don't even take enough salt in our body because salt created our digestive system. The hydrochloric acid, pepsin. Without salt, you cannot have hydrochloric acid or pepsin. So we needed salt, we need sulfur, we need all these things. These are conditions that created life. The amino acids of life was alanine, glycine, and lysine were the key components that created life. These were the important factors of the amino acids that were found and discovered. And man duplicated these life forms back in the chemistry, and they were able to produce these elements of fatty acids and sugars and glucose and all of these. So once I understood where life came from and the chemistry of life, there was a bacteria billions of years ago that started everything, every living system. This bacteria was called mitochondria. And the mitochondria evolved into different elements and created fish and created plants and created reptiles. It created animals. Everything was created by this mitochondria. Why? This mitochondria had the ability to make energy and to create replication and duplication of cells and everything else. So once we understood about mitochondria, we understood that mitochondria was essential to create everything, every component of who we are, of every system. Plants have mitochondria, you know, all of that. So that's why today there's a big research on mitochondria and all of that. So once we understood about mitochondria, then we understood how it works and the importance of the mitochondria in our cells. You and I wouldn't be able to stand up or get up or think or ability to exercise or move without the mitochondria. Well, let me ask you, what is important? Going back 65,000 to 100,000 years ago, 200,000, we had light, natural light. We were outdoors. We didn't have anything over us. We were hunters. We were gatherers. Weston Price, you know? I studied him quite a bit, and we did a lot of research at the same time. So light was so important because light created photosynthesis and created the mitochondria and created cytochrome oxidase enzyme. This enzyme is so important in making energy. It's an electron transport mechanism. It takes electrons and oxygen and gives us the energy. And the way we get cytochrome oxidase enzyme is through light, red light, orange light, infrared light, sunlight. And the human body needs 14 to 15 hours of light a day. And I'll give you some examples of some of my patients I'm working for free. I don't charge for cancer patients or MS or Parkinson's or anybody, so I will give you the information. And we've seen turnarounds in people like Parkinson's walking again, able to get out of bed for the first time. Cancer patients in remission where they had 10 years of battling of nonstop cancer growth. It was by getting them outdoors, getting them in the sun, giving them natural lightings indoor that gives us the same full spectrum light. These are the factors that we need to create in our life again, and that is the most valuable tool you'll have. When I take a cancer patient, I said the first thing I want you to do is just give me plenty of light a day. And that's the first thing I start with them, because nothing will work. I can give them every nutrient, every compound out there. Yes, they'll get better. We'll put them in remission for a while, but they are not going to heal themselves until they get natural lighting. And another way I tell them to go is get infrared heat lamps. And it's a simple $10, $15 device that has so much profound effect by increasing cytochrome oxidase enzyme in your body and by bringing back the natural photosynthesis that your human body needs, which is lacking, and it's becoming disease and decaying and aging. And so putting an infrared heat lamp, just a clear infrared heat lamp for 15, 20 minutes in the morning, in the afternoon, in the evening, helps dramatically. And I've seen patients recover from every ailment out there just by doing that and getting natural lighting. Simple things like that have the most profound effects. So aging and inflammation, there's no doubt. Inflammation is just an environmental factor. We can have stresses in our lives. You know, we can get hit. We can have accidents. We can have bacteria, heavy metals, chemicals, all of these things. One of the things I learned in caloric restriction diet, why it extends lifespan in animals. We know it may extend in some humans, but we're not 100% sure that putting people in a stressful condition like reducing calories like that strictly has any merit in human studies. We haven't done enough of that, but I did some at UCLA with patients. The patients I took were some athletes and some regular patients. And this thing keeps falling down. Yes, I'll keep it in my hand. it's, sorry about that. So what we found is caloric restriction diet, what it really is intended to do, and the blood tests were done in animals, and then what I did in some of the human studies is found that it reduces oxidative stress to mitochondria. That was the big factor of this whole caloric restriction, intermittent fasting autophagy mechanism. The less you can reduce mitochondrial damage, because the mitochondria is a 24-hour burning machine. It's like a fireplace. You put fire in there, everything you eat, protein, fats, carbs, have to be broken down and oxidized to glucose. So you have this ability of this Krebs cycle, pyruvate, and all that, and cytochrome oxidase, all of these electron oxidation factors, reductions factors, the body breaks the foods down and has to break it down and oxidize to glucose. Glucose is the final end stage of the mitochondria to make ATP. And through ATP, it's the fuel of the gasoline that you drive the car. And this ATP then is converted to CO2. And CO2 then is converted to water. It's like, you know, this exchange into water, and then CO2 exchanged into oxygen and waits for the hemoglobin, the blood, to provide another 4 or 5 molecules of oxygen in exchange. And you have to have it. In cancer cells, they don't have that ability to oxidize glucose well. So they don't go through the pyruvate mechanism, and they perform and they break down fatty acids or proteins. And then it becomes lactic acid. And lactic acid is now converted to ammonia and carbon monoxide. And this fuels the cancer cells over and over. And that's what Robert Watts said in his television show with Charlie Rose, is this inability of the body to oxidize glucose to convert to ATP, to CO2, to water. Now it's breaking down into lactic acid, ammonia, carbon monoxide, which is toxic to every other cell, but cancer cells survive with it. We need to convert that, change that. And how do we change it? Well, there's many ways we can talk about it, and I can tell you how to do it very easily. And we've done it. DCA was a very popular drug in Calgary because it takes lactic acid back to CO2. That's the whole thing, is bringing lactic acid back to CO2. Breathing, exercise, just breathing, doing bag breathing is important. I breathe every day. I do CO2 breathing every morning and at night. And I'll teach you how to do that. It's very simple. It's very powerful. It may do more than any nutrition you'll ever take, because breathing is the function of all living systems, and we don't breathe enough. We're very shallow breathers. So we're not enhancing oxygen in our cells, and we're not increasing mitochondrial function, and all these things. So the mitochondria needs sunlight, needs natural lighting, needs nanometers of wavelength from the orange, red to the infrared spectrum, and that's how it survives. It increases mitochondria, increases complex 4. Okay? And that's how methylene blue works. Methylene blue, which I talk a lot about, which I have 2 people right now with Parkinson's walking again because they took methylene blue. It increases complex 4, which helps with cytochrome oxidase enzyme, and then increases mitochondrial function. Basically, the next function is nitric oxide. It suppresses nitric oxide because nitric oxide is an inflammatory mechanism in cancers, in Parkinson's, and it's very high in Parkinson's and MS and Alzheimer's. It suppresses mitochondria and thyroid function. And like I said, the thyroid is so important. It's the most important organ you have because the thyroid and mitochondria work together. You have a good thyroid, you have a good mitochondria. You have a good mitochondria, you got a good thyroid. They work together by increasing metabolism and energy and having a positive attitude every morning and sleeping at night. And I find that when I put my patients who I'm working with is they get more sunlight, they get more natural lighting, they sleep better. Why? Circadian. The hormones all function on light. Everything is run by circadian hormone. You know that you have cortisol level at night. It's a circadian function. But you can reduce that by limiting the inflammatory mechanism at night, by eating less at night and eating the right foods, by increasing red light, orange light, or any of those lights at night, turning off your computers, your television at night. Sleep without having your computers on. Turn off and unplug everything at night. Because if you don't sleep at night and you don't recover, you don't get 7 to 8 hours of good regenerative sleep, you're not going to heal. It doesn't make a difference. You need to regenerate because at night is when you regenerate. The daytime, your body works in a catabolic way. It breaks down everything. It goes through stresses of life, through irritation from food, from stresses of living and handling the traffic and money. But at night, you want to calm the body. You want to bring the body to 0.5 hertz to 4 hertz. That is the delta wavelength. That is where your deep sleep comes from. You got to put your body back into the deep REM of sleep, which is 0.5 hertz, which is so low, below everything. Your cell phones operate on what? Gigahertz, megahertz. We're in the billion and thousands and hundreds of thousands of hertz throughout the day through fluorescent lightings, through Wi-Fi, television, radio, phones, and every time you drive and you're talking to your Bluetooth, you're doubling the exposure to EMF, right? You did a good paper on that in a lecture. So EMF is real, folks. England just reported back that there's a double of exposure of brain tumors since the use of cell phones.
Our Just study will support that.
Yes, yes. And I'm on the board of UC Berkeley's environmental with Joel Moskowitz. Anybody knows him? Yeah. He's a brilliant, brilliant individual. So we need at nighttime to eliminate everything. So what I do is I unplug everything. I take my circuit breaker in the bedroom and I turn everything off. I want to have clean energy. I don't want to have any electromagnetic influence while I'm sleeping because I want to create my brain to go into that 0.5 hertz up to 4 hertz during the night. That is where healing occurs, in that range of frequency, and that is way below. You know that your heart resonates at what frequency? Anybody knows? I worked with the pacemaker guy who invented it in England, and then Rafe Tawako, 1.14 hertz. You know how low that is? It takes 1 second for a complete wavelength of 1 second for one wavelength to go positive, negative, back. It takes 1 second for that wavelength. Your phones go like this in billions and billions of cycles per second. So you're overstimulating the body, and the body doesn't know how to handle that. You're overstimulating the mitochondria. The mitochondria doesn't work on that level. It works on a different level. The mitochondria needs the 0.5 hertz at night to 4 hertz in order to regenerate and rebuild and reprocess the whole function again. And the heart works on that level, and your thyroid works on there. So we're over-inundated by EMF, Wi-Fi's, television, radios. Unplug everything. So 2 things I tell my patient: get plenty of light, natural light, get yourself a clear heat lamp and put it on 2-3 times a day. Get something, if you're indoors, get near a window and work by a window. If you don't have it, go buy yourself a 250 watts or incandescent light that is in the 5,000, 1,000 luminous or 5,000 luminous. You want to create a lot of light during the day. You want that environment. You need that 12 to 15-hour environment of our genetics that we were born with, 65,000 years. You know, we did a study that it takes almost 65,000 years to change your genes, to alter it to another function. So it takes 65,000 years for us to get adapted to this condition today, who we are today. The cell phone radiation group, you know. We'll probably be prehistoric animals by then, you know. We'll be back to the dinosaur area. All of us will be growing and eating each other up. That's who we're going to get to. So we got to get back into the 65,000 years ago where our genes expression started. And we have epigenetic genes. So the environment changes our genes. It turns on and turns off. Epigenetic genes are basically light switches. There's more light switches in our body than anything else. There's more microbes in our body, bacteria, than there are genes or DNA or mitochondria. Did you know that? So the gut is really an important area. And I'll talk to you about some exciting things on the gut and how it works and what we're doing with it. So understanding that, you know, our genes are controlled by our epigenetics. How we control it is due to the environment we create, the light we produce, the foods we're going to eat, and the sleep we get. And genes are also controlled by zinc, B6, glycine, amino acids. They're controlling our genes expression. So if we're lacking magnesium or zinc or lysine or any of these compounds, yes, if we don't get enough polyphenolics, you know, from our foods, if we don't eat the right foods. And what is the right foods? There are inflammatory foods out there that are dramatic, you know. One of the things we learned in the caloric restriction diet is that certain proteins are inflammatory in nature. And the ones that Richard Miller discovered as well, he was right on. He discovered that tryptophan and methionine and cysteine have inflammatory mechanisms that suppress your mitochondria and thyroid function. So foods that are high in that, and that's where whey comes in, but I'll share with you how you suppress those foods, like taking whey. We did a study with whey protein on our athletes, and we found little problems with digestion and other things like that, and a little weight gain came out of it. But when we added Knox gelatin collagen back in the 80s, I was the first one to introduce collagen in the form of gelatin back in 83, 84, and 85, and 86, 87 to the Olympic athletes, the way we talked about at dinner, is that it makes sense because I learned that these amino acids, these proteins, have valuable non-inflammatory mechanisms, but building and repairing and regenerate, because the spinal cord, the notochord, was the first element that was found in living systems like fish or like reptilians. They had to have the spinal cord called the notochord, which is 99% collagen, which then developed the peripheral nerves and the myelin sheath and allowed for energy to go up to the brain. And by giving my athletes in 84, 85 as an alternative to steroids, we started using Knox gelatin and vitamin D and calcium and vitamin C. And we saw dramatic results. We saw repair and less injuries. We did that with Pete Carroll and the Seattle Seahawks. And they saw the same results. We did some studies with Ohio State recently on that. And that's how I got into collagen. And I learned about the mechanism of collagen. In 1984, 85, I worked with a chemist, a brilliant chemist, who developed the first collagen, hydrolyzed collagen for me to use with my athletes rather than gelatin, because gelatin is a little bit difficult to dissolve in water and heats up and you have Jell-O. But Jell-O is good for you. You should eat it every day. So we found that the kinds of protein are very important. And we discovered that in our studies that proteins that are non-inflammatory, and inflammatory meaning they suppress thyroid function, they cause kidney problems by affecting the gene glutho, and I'll talk about this gene glutho, which I have in here. We just added that, so if I can, let me go there. Oh no, going the wrong direction, like always. Okay, here, glutho gene, very important. The biggest problem we have today, let me finish up the protein thing. So we found that 3 amino acids are very crucial in all inflammatory mechanism and reactive oxygen. Tryptophan, methionine, and cysteine. You need them, but you need them in very low levels. So why caloric restriction diet had profound effects, it eliminated a lot of the protein that was causing these inflammatory mechanisms, such as those 3. And number 2, it eliminated heavy metals. A lot of heavy metals in our water and our air and, in sort of our food have very damaging effects in mitochondrial function and causes reactive oxygen species. So the more reactive oxygen species in the mitochondria, like burning the fuel, the more problems we have, and that's where autophagy came in. Autophagy is a mechanism, and I'll give you a brief mechanism. Your body is an incredible recycling ability. It knows how to sweep the floor, which is around the mitochondria, and takes a pan and puts it in there and then takes it out to the garbage. That's autophagy. And then from the garbage, there's another system that comes and takes it outside of the area and recycle it through, out of there. It either recycles the damaged proteins, the mitochondria, damaged cells, whatever, from overuse, extensive stress, and it's a wear and tear. Every day we use our body. We also wear and tear our body, and cancer is constantly growing every day because it's a natural stressor, but our body knows how to get rid of it. As long as we're healthy, we know how to get rid of it. So autophagy is a mechanism of getting the damaged misfolding protein, and misfolding protein is when the body the protein always sends messages out all the time, like a plane, and that plane gets dropped to a location. It opens up and reads the message, and then understands what to do, closes it back, sends it to another location. Keeps unfolding, 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 until you don't fold it back correctly. It's a simple mechanism of called misfolding protein. The body knows how to handle that and removes it out of the system. It recycles everything out. It either uses for energy or just gets rid of it through urine, fecal, or burns it for fuel through a mitochondria that's efficiently working and uses as energy. And that's where intermittent fasting comes from, and that's where limiting inflammatory proteins come from. They do the same thing. Mushrooms have the same profound effect of increasing autophagy. There's a sugar called trehalose. Trehalose is a sugar that also has this ability that is manufactured by your mushrooms, has that ability to do autophagy. And movement, energy, all of that. Increasing cytochrome oxidase enzyme. Light therapy does the same thing. It increases autophagy mechanisms. While you're sleeping at night, it does that for you if you eliminate all the electromagnetic pollution around you. It does that for you. So your body's doing that all the time, and that's why you're staying healthy. And also, it also regulates your P53, so it recognizes cancer cells before they start growing, and it stops them, causes apoptosis. That's where zinc and amino acids like lysine and glycine, and your green tea and eating cruciferous vegetables that have to be cooked or boiled to get rid of all these acids that causes thyroid damage. So cooking your food is very important. Matter of fact, if you read the studies on on how our brain developed. How did our brain really develop compared to the lion or tiger or giraffe or anybody else or cat or mice? We cooked meat. When we started cooking meat, our mandible, the genes here started declining and becoming smaller, and it allowed for our brain to grow. Eric Wrangham, read his book at Harvard. He did the longest research of anybody on the growth of the brain and how it developed. And he's right on, because we also saw that in the caloric restriction diet. When we started using cooked foods, we saw changes in the brain function. So cooking food was very valuable in creating our brain. That's why tigers have similar brains, monkeys and all that. How many of them cook? Now, if they start learning how to cook, we're in trouble. We need to move.
But not too much.
Not too much. That's true. So that's another way of how our brain started. So what I do is, there's also, we're looking at, another problem we have. How many of you know of people, somebody that has loss of bone, hip, knee, cartilage damage? It's very popular. I mean, I get, you know how many athletes I right now recommend for PRP or ozone or stem cells therapy? Literally 100 athletes a month call me and ask me, what do I do for my knee or hip or shoulder? Everybody has it. I don't care what age you are. Calcium is such an important nutrient, and it's declining because our food industry, our ability to get natural calcium in nature from our food is going down. There was a published paper written by a man recently about calcium depletion in our foods, and that is causing loss of bone. Now, the big thing is the GLOTHO gene. The GLOTHO gene is now discovered to have anti-aging ability. When it's overexpressed, it extends the lifespan of animals, but they're finding in locations in the country where overexpression of GLOTHO gene increases lifespan. And how's that stimulated? It's stimulated by vitamin D, K, and calcium, and reducing parathyroid function. And what contributes to that problem is too much phosphorus in our food. Every food has high phosphorus, but our calcium level to our phosphorus is declining. So if you eat nuts, you'll find, I want you to go to nutrition data, put down the item you want to look at, and it gives you everything about the food. It gives you the protein, the carbs, the fats, the types of fats, the grams of fats, and it gives you every nutrient and amino acid and tells you the ratio of calcium, phosphorus, magnesium, zinc, manganese, vitamin K, vitamin D. So it tells you what you're eating. It's called nutrition data, and you put down peanuts, you put down almonds, you put down sardines, you put down anything. It tells you the ratio. And all your nuts are very high in phosphorus. So if you're consuming a lot of nuts, you're really depleting your calcium levels. And you need calcium to rebuild and regenerate. And you need calcium for proper gut function. And you need calcium to sleep at night. Not only magnesium, but you need both. And one of the studies I did in 1990 with a guy named Fred Eichhorn, who reversed his own pancreatic cancer. He was a chemist at Stony Brook who discovered the chemistry, like I did, about the cells. And he started putting together a product called Select, which I helped him find a manufacturing facility to create this product. And it basically has 5,000 to 10,000 grams of calcium per dosage. And he started taking this, and he reversed his own pancreatic. Yes, you have to take enormous amount of calcium. I just made a calcium product in our product. I like glycine. No, and he.
Thousands of grams.
I'm saying 5 grams to 10 grams. I'm saying 5,000 to 10,000 milligrams a day. He took a calcium, and he corrected his own pancreatic. But not only that, he saw he saw about 3,000 patients in the 10-year span that he was available, because his program took off like crazy. Everybody. The FDA came after him. And I knew what happened. And then at the end result, the FDA says, I have somebody in my family who has cancer. Can we come and talk to you? That's what happened, because he called me up and told me the whole story. And so you need calcium. Calcium, I will say carbonate is fine. Bisglycinate is your best choice. The same thing with magnesium. If you like magnesium, the best choice are malate or glycinate. They have the best absorption and utilization in the body. And they're easy. They don't put pressure, they don't put any discomfort in your gut. So what's finding in glutathione, they're finding that this high phosphorus consumption, it comes from eating beef, it comes from eating too much dairy products, it comes from every food has high phosphorus. But if you increase your calcium and lower your phosphorus level, you're regulating vitamin D more efficiently, and vitamin D is necessary to come in there and carry with vitamin K the calcium into your bones. So I started working with these athletes. I said, we got to double your calcium with magnesium, vitamin D, vitamin K, and collagen. We're regenerating cartilage in their knees, in their hips, in other areas of their joints. And then we do a little PRP, platelet-rich blood, and ozone. And some people now we're doing embryonic fluid stem cells. And we're seeing dramatic results with that. But until we do, and I work with a lot of stem cell clinics, okay? And a lot of the stem cell clinics, they have to use collagen to double their stem cells, because collagen has that ability. Not only that, it's the only food on the planet that is non-inflammatory. And Weston Price used colloids of collagen in his program. It was a big thing for him to use these cartilage, these gelatinous foods as part of the program for eating and health, and discovered that. Another thing I'll share with Weston Price, when was the first, about how many thousands of years ago was the first farming set up?
10,000.
You're smart. Where? Which country?
Middle East, I guess.
Middle East. You're very good. You're getting there. Okay. He gets a new car from the club. Okay, make sure he gets a new car. One that, you pedal. Okay? You know where it was found? In Turkey. The first farming settled down in Turkey, where they started growing their, their food there in different ways, and they started using goats and, started developing the cattle and all that. When was civilization developed?
Persia.
Huh?
Persia.
Where?
Iran.
You're very close. Iraq.
Iraq.
Iraq was the first established civilization of life. And that's where all the farming developed the agricultural industry, where they started growing wheat to survive. So the gatherer and hunter always had to travel to find food. They hunted. They ate roots, vegetables, grounds, whatever was growing naturally. And then when they started developing fire, they got their brains, so they started becoming smarter, and that's how they started farming and realizing civilization. They had a city. They developed a city.
We went downhill from there.
That's true. They all went downhill. So
Male supremacy.
one of my friends at UCLA and another friend at another university discovered bones and tooth and teeth from these skulls from people of that century. And also looked at from centuries before that, 11,000 to 60,000, they discovered skulls and bones. And they found that there was an increase in tooth decay from the civilization farming, and there was dental decay. And the average height, what was the average height before the civilization farming?
5'3".
Huh?
5'3".
from the farming and civilization area, right? Before that, 5'8". 5'8". They were 5'8". They were around that area. So we started declining in growth. It was interesting. We went down to 5'4", 5'3", from 5'8", because of the grains and the cultures and not eating as like hunters again. And that's what happened. And, you know, that's where your group discovered the Massa people from Africa. I used to coach a lot of Africans back in the 80s, 84 and 88. And one of them was the most incredible athlete I ever coached. And his culture ate milk and animals. That's it. They didn't have no grains. They cooked their animals, but they ate everything from, and they also consumed the blood. The blood. And their bone structure was incredible. Their speed was incredible. Their health was incredible. We did a lot of mitochondria research and oxidative damage and CO2 levels and lactic acid levels and all that. And that's also very good. You should all do a lactic acid test and a CO2 test and a calcium and measure your parathyroid, because the parathyroid was very important, and it started declining because calcium, we started losing calcium in our body. And it went into an inflammatory state, it went into an arthritic state, it went into the arteries and started causing problems with arteriosclerosis and all that. So we find that by increasing vitamin D and vitamin K and calcium and removing phytic acid, where do you get phytic acid? From consumption of grains, right?
Seeds and nuts.
Seeds and nuts, but grains. When you cook corn in lime, it removes that phytic acid. So phytic acid is a phosphorus-bound.
What acid? I'm sorry.
Phytic acid is a phosphorus-bound protein that inhibits zinc and other minerals, zinc in particular, and manganese, and some calcium and magnesium from being absorbed. It breaks it down and doesn't let it go into the bones or the tissue. And that's the other problem that we're having. So that's why consumption of legumes and things like that are not your best friend. You know, because of the glutathione and the high phosphorus foods found in there and phytic acid. So that's why when I hear people love to consume these things, you got to be careful. And again, nutrition data will tell you all the levels of calcium versus phosphorus. And once we understand that and we reduce the phosphorus in our diet, increase calcium, health comes back. And one of the studies that was done by my friend at UCLA, she was incredible, was that they discovered that phosphorus levels in the civilization area when wheat was developed and other grains and corn and all that, phosphorus doubled up versus calcium. Prior to that, calcium was extremely high, extremely high. It was double. And that was very interesting. I didn't really pay attention to that until now. When I got into it more and more recently in the last 5-10 years, what she was doing was amazing. And you know, she just started looking into all this, and that was very interesting. So it controls a lot of things. So the glutathione is going to be a big thing coming out. You're going to see it everywhere. It's like in the next vitamin D, K, CoQ10, all of that. So, you know, we know that the DNA, the mitochondria, Guarante and Sinclair out of Harvard, they're selling you a product called nicotinic derivose NR, which is developed by Chromadex, which I'm working a lot with. They're selling you the fountain of youth because if you can increase NAD levels in your body, it enhances oxidation of glucose, which enhances ATP, which is a very important factor in energy production because the immune system, everything that goes on in your body requires a high mitochondrial function, a high NAD function, and we need that. And now all the studies on cancer are showing that redox cycling is very important. They found that all cancer cells have a very high reduced state of level rather than oxidized state of level. The oxidized carries the glucose to the ATP, and the ATP makes the energy, and the end result is the reduction level, and that goes up, and that needs to shift back to the NAD level. And that's all it is in redox. So cancer cells have the opposite. They don't have a good oxidation level. They don't have a high NAD. They have a higher reduced state, a higher state of reduction state in the anaerobic, yeah. And that's, you know, and we'll talk a little bit about the CO2 and how important that is in shifting that. When we work with athletes, we develop a chamber where we were that mimics high altitude. People that live in high altitude have longer longevity, like Georgia and all these places that supposedly have longevity, they all have high altitude. And high altitude means you're getting more CO2. That's all it is. You cannot get, it inhibits lactic acid development. That's what, I'll tell you a study that I read, a very interesting study. There was a study done by a doctor, and he was interested in high altitude in training, but also in health. And he started performing some treatments with cancer patients with chemo. And he found, he sent them to high altitude areas to work with doctors there with chemo. And then the other ones he kept in the sea level. And the ones in high altitude actually survived. They were able to overcome their cancer. And the ones in the sea level did not. All of them died of cancer.
Do people in Colorado live longer than people in California?
The only problem with people in Colorado is the stressful life they live in and the damage from environmental pollutions that they create from cars and all that. Once the car industry came into play, we polluted our environment. Once we developed planes, we polluted our environments. You know that? Yes?
Well, I'm confused. You have less oxygen when you go in that.
That's okay. CO2 is much more. Yeah, we'll do that later. CO2 is more predominant as a byproduct of oxygen, but also in athletes performing in high altitude, they have more energy when they come down to normal levels. They can perform better. And CO2 is very crucial in it's a molecule that William Koch, how many of you ever studied Koch therapy? You got to go back and study Koch, K-O-C-H. I want you to go back and study who William Koch is.
Did you spell that?
K-O-C-H. You need to study William Koch. Back in the 50s, he was one of the true discoverers of cancer treatment in the world. And he found a molecule in the blood, and that molecule was CO2. And that CO2, he discovered that cancer cells do not have that ability as a byproduct of cell respiration. They go into lactate. That's how he discovered the Koch molecule of the quinones. All the quinones are in the family of CoQ10, MitoQ, and vitamin K, and La Pacha. La Pacha. I'm going to give ubiquinol. La Pacha, Pau de Arco, has profound mitochondria function. It also has shown to stop cancer cells. So he discovered all that back in the 40s and 50s, okay? And he was treating people in Brazil, and when he went to Brazil, he discovered their La Pacha there, which is Pau de Arco, as a molecule of what he calls quinones. And these are very powerful molecules that he used for cancer treatment and very successful. And you can Google it and you'll see what it does, La Pacha or Pau de Arco. Another thing also that is very powerful in cancer treatment is, is bringing back oxidation of glucose, and DCA will do that, biotin will do that. I have a lot of molecules that will all do that. Free radicals, let me show you some of the molecules that have. Also, one of the things we talked about in EMR, let me tell you also, these are the factors that we discovered in caloric restriction diet that were very important factors. Polyunsaturated oils suppress mitochondria function. causes oxidative damage to the mitochondria, to the DNA and RNA of the mitochondria. It also causes glycation, and it causes damage to the oxidation of glucose in the electron transport mechanism. It's well published. I talked to the lipid chemist at Stanford and Buck Institute. I spent time with them. I read all their research, and they gave me a book from Stanford that's that big on lipid chemistry. It talks about all about fatty acids such as omega-3s. The consumption of omega-3s is very unstable and very highly unstable that it causes oxidative damage and it causes mitochondrial damage. So be careful. I forward to 3 friends of mine. 2 of them are MDs. Both of them had, and Len is one of them, had a stroke. He had a bypass, and he was taking omega-3s. I forwarded him 2 papers. He read the 2 papers. He said, Bernd, I'm stopping omega-3s. You changed my mind. And then I told him about aspirin. I gave him 3 papers on aspirin. He said, Bernd, I'm going to start taking aspirin every night. Every night. And he's walking, talking today. He was at my panel. If you saw him in my panel, Len Saputa, he will tell you that. These are factors that cause mitochondrial damage, thyroid damage. I forward all the published research. And when he read it, he was, because he thought, like everybody else, omega-3 is very good. It's anti-inflammatory. It does this. Well, there was a lot of studies that were coming out showing no, it's the opposite. In the lipid chemist department at Stanford taught me all that, and so did Linus Pauling Institute up in Oregon with Tori Hagen, brilliant guy. And the other guy, Fries, he's a vitamin E guru there. And vitamin E is one of the most important nutrients we can all take. Everybody should be on vitamin E every single day. It has one of the few of all the nutrients out there with sufficient data showing that it has life extension abilities. Vitamin E protects cell membrane, lipid oxidation, and Tori Hagen is totally convinced vitamin E is very important. And vitamin E in Edison Pharmaceutical is one of the complexes, tocotrienols, that are reversing mitochondrial aging of the brain and mitochondrial diseases. It's called Edison Pharmaceutical, and it's, they have a patent on that and all of that. So one of the nutrients important is vitamin E. It also helps with protection against seizures. I used to give pilots that fly, and we were talking about all the pilots, and I was always scared to go in a plane because they get seizures. It's radiation, it happens. So I put them on CoQ10 and vitamin E, and it seems to it got rid of seizures immediately. And that's the only thing I found that works very fast. So all of that, we'll do questions, answers. So we want to stay away from vegetables. What's good for you? Well, Weston Price will tell you, get back to butter. Get back to cream. Okay, get back to nature. Eat what nature gives you, not what is produced. You don't want that, okay? You want to go back to nature. That's so important, okay? We talked about autophagy. We talked about nicotine. Let me give you a sort of a landmark. Okay, these are the factors of nutrition we know works. Niacinamide, I take True Niagen every day. I take Methylene Blue every single morning. I'm going to be 70. I did a biological study on my age, and I'll give you the report if anybody wants to see it, with a cardiovascular surgeon who developed the iHeart. And twice he did it on me, and the iHeart report came back that my biological age when I did it was 67. My biological age was 25. He couldn't believe it. He said, I've done thousands of this. He said, I want you to come back. I got to do it again. 2 weeks, 3 weeks, I go back there, and I was worried that I'm going to get really old. I went in there, and I'll show you if anybody wants to see it. I have the eye report with me. The second time I did it, I was 24. The third time he did it, he said, there's no way, I've never seen any, I was 24 again. It's because of what I teach and what I practice, okay? It's how to eat right. Every morning I get up, I have a soft-boiled egg, I have a poached egg, I have my collagen, that's it. I don't eat anything else. Tim Blake up there He's known me for 20, 25 years. He knows what I do, right? And he can tell you testimonials of all the people I work with. He knows them all. And at lunchtime, I have a protein and vegetable. At night, I try to cut down the amount of food, and I use a lot of red light, a lot of orange light. I expose myself to natural lighting all the time, all the time. I'm not afraid of cancer, okay? And that's what I do on a regular basis, and I do collagen. If you want any information, you can go on Bernd Friedlander, Dr. Bernd Friedlander, Facebook, Instagram, and I'm also on Amazon. My products are on Amazon under Collagen Renewal. And this new Collagen Renewal, we did an actual study way before with Ohio State in performance enhancing with several athletes there. And it was incredible. All right, let's see if anything else. I'm going to finish up, and these are drugs that you should not be taking anyway. And that's it. Any questions? There's a lot more I can give you, but in 1 hour, there's no way I can give you that much.
With the increased calcium intake, how do you avoid kidney stones?
I can't hear you.
Speaking right into it.
CO2 breathing, quickly.
Check, 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 check.
Okay, 2 ways,
Check,
3
check.
different
Is that
methods of
working?
doing CO2 breathing. Take a deep breath and let it out through the nose. And then plug your nose, hold it for 30 to 40 to 60 seconds. You can walk, you can do not inhale anything. Okay? So you do this. And then again. And out, hold it, pinch your nose, and try to count. You may only be able to do it 5 seconds, but every day you increase it, do it several times. Reverses asthma. I've had 3 people right now in the club where we work out. Asthma is gone. It does mental function.
All right,
Another
Bernd, let's stick to the questions.
Okay.
We got about 2 minutes here, and that's it. Hold on.
I can show you more exercise on breathing.
How do you avoid kidney stones with the increase in calcium?
Kidney stones is not caused by calcium. It's actually the opposite. The phosphorus level is too high. And that's why you got to go into GlowTho and read all about how kidney failure and bone failure is now a result of high phosphorus. By eliminating that and increasing calcium and vitamin D and vitamin K, you get rid of that. And I've done that with several people. And I have several friends who have kidney stones quite a bit, and they're in a lot of pain.
So if
Reduce phosphorus at high calcium. I'm going to tell you, I take a lot of calcium. I take 3,000 or 4,000 a day. And I try to eat a lot of high calcium foods. I'm going to tell you, calcium is important.
How much niacin do you take?
Niacinamide, I take True Niagen now. I'm doing a chromatase study for them. And I take 250 to 500 milligrams of True Niagen, which is NR, or 1,000 niacinamide in the morning. I've been doing niacinamide in the morning for 1,000 with 1 drop of methylene blue from the fish tanks, the ones you buy for fish.
Please don't answer the question.
Yeah.
So if you're a vegetarian and want to, live on the grains and the vegetables, and so what is the answer? I mean, they all have phytic acid, so how do you get them out? I mean, just cooking solves the problem, or how do you get it? Or sprout them, or what's the answer?
Okay. The problem with vegetarian is you really need to take B12 sublingually. You're deficient in B12. And B12 is such an important B complex that is necessary. I have a lot of vegetarians, and I'll tell you what I do. They just increase their calcium, magnesium, vitamin D, vitamin K, and zinc. And they're able to function a lot better. I have a vegetarian who's got a tremendous shoulder, loss of bone in the shoulder. She's doing this with, I finally got her to do collagen, but she was in a lot of pain. But the calcium, magnesium, vitamin D, vitamin K, and B12 extremely got rid of the pain. And you got to do that. That's the only way you can do it, because you are consuming a lot of phosphorus food. Go into nutrition data, folks. You learn a lot from what you're eating. Once you understand the phosphorus levels you are consuming is going to be a major factor. Yeah.
What type of lab work? Can you say more about the name of the lab and what kind of lab test it is that measures the NADH and NADH?
You know what? For NADH, I was talking to, Richard Maystayer? You know who he is? He's the guru of NADIV. They're working with a German and Australian company to come up with a very good NAD test. Right now, there isn't. It's an intracellular test, really. You got to go intracellular. I was talking to Bruce Ames about it years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We need a break.
Yeah. So there's no lab for that, but anybody else? If you want to stay here?
No. We've got a break. We have another speaker. We want to respect his time, and so we need to cut things off. So we have a 10-minute break. We're going to stop promptly at 8:45. So join us then. If you have questions for Bernd, you can ask them here. But once you're done with the questions, we need you to come back right at 8:45.